Thank you, Raj. I've been trying to live down that light bulb incident for the last 15 years. Thanks for reminding everyone. Hi, I'm Raoul Bhavnani from the India Center and FTI Consulting, and really pleased to be here moderating this fantastic panel. We will have one additional member of the panel joining us in a couple of minutes who's running back from a meeting. But let me start it off with a couple of introductory remarks about the topic, the path less traveled, introduce our panelists, and then go to a bunch of questions. And I'm going to try to, in this session, I'm going to try to dig down under the waves, so to speak, to ask some appropriate personal questions about motivations to run, what it was like, family questions, background questions, to really get at what are the catalysts, what are the drivers for people getting off the sidelines and into the game. I think that is a theme that I've now heard over the last several hours, that this community is really galvanizing getting off the sidelines. But you have a number of people who are on the panel today who've blazed a path. Some have been at it for a number of years or have been thinking about it since they were very, very young. So we really want to dig into some of that. I mean, I think as you all know, India and Indian Americans have a mixed, and I would say sort of tumultuous relationship with politics over the years. Why is that? I mean, politics took so many different forms in India, so many different rulers, so many different sub-countries within the subcontinent. Politics were twisted and manipulated by British colonial rulers, diversity, bureaucracy, poverty. I mean, that gave rise to generations, unfortunately, generations of corruption in politics, which I think has made a wide variety of Indians living in India and Indian Americans here pretty skeptical of political life, pretty skeptical of politicians. Even the founders of India and Pakistan talked about how corruption and problems in politics were a real stain on the country. Gandhi said, corruption and hypocrisy ought not to be inevitable products of democracy, as they undoubtedly are today. He was saying that back in the 1940s. It's still being said today. So you have this skepticism about politics. And for years, Indian Americans did not regularly choose elective office, seeking other professions, as I think we all know. But now, we're seeing a veritable explosion of Indian Americans drawn to public service and elective office. Somewhere between 60 and 100 are actively running for office or thinking about office in this cycle, and the tide is really turning. Why is that? What are the reasons that Indian Americans are getting off the sidelines and into the game? Is this a path less traveled, or just another in a long line of accomplishments like the spelling bee? We have four panelists. Ravi, Bhalla, joining us today to unpack this, and you guys are going to have to team up on the mics. I think there's only three, so you'll have to swap them back and forth. Or Ravi, you could stand on the other side. In any event, let me do a quick intros for all of them. I think most of these guys are known to you. They're incredible leaders in their own right. Let me start with Aruna Miller, who's sitting two to my left. She's running for Congress in Maryland's 6th Congressional District, which is the westernmost sliver of Maryland, bordering Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Virginia. Her father immigrated to the United States. She studied engineering, and he studied engineering, and he moved the family from India. And Aruna came here when she was 7 and didn't speak a word of English. Her father then became ill. Aruna had to work her way through college, became a civil engineer, married her college sweetheart, Dave Miller, moved to Maryland, raised 3 daughters, and also cares for an aging mother at home. She applied her civil engineering to government and became a transportation engineer in Montgomery County. Bush v. Gore was the impulse for her to get involved in local issues. It was also the first time that she cast a vote in an American election. She started volunteering in her community and then was elected to Maryland House of Delegates in 2010, representing State Legislative District 15. That's Aruna. Ravi Bhalla, sitting at the end, our current mayor of Hoboken, New Jersey. Born and raised in New Jersey, he took office in January of 2018 after a hard-fought campaign of 6 candidates. He's the first Sikh in elective office in New Jersey and the first Sikh mayor to be directly elected in the United States. So he has more letters and degrees that follow his last name than I have in my last name, but I'll quickly run them through. He's got a BA from UC Berkeley in political psychology, a master's in public administration and public policy from the London School of Economics, and a law degree, to top it off, from Tulane. He worked as a lawyer in Newark, and it was there that he had his rights violated when he was advocating for a client in jail. And that started him wanting to reform federal government visitation policies in correctional facilities. And it was the spur for him to get into public office. He served as a city councilman for several years, Democratic committeeman as well in Hoboken, and ran for office after observing mismanagement of local government and the city in financial dire straits. And he's married to Bindya and has 2 children. Villivalam, who's here at the end, he's running for the state senate in the 8th district of Illinois. In northwest suburban Chicago, a seat that's currently held by Democrat Ira Silverstein, who he defeated in a primary in March. He was born and raised in Chicago, hometown boy, BA in political science from George Washington University. Parents immigrated to the United States in 1970, where they went to school and became public servants. He's been very involved in healthcare. He's seen healthcare policy up close and personal. He was an SEIU healthcare advocate, and he's a major expert in Obamacare and has personally signed up thousands of members. And he's married to Elizabeth. Preston Kulkarni, the final bio, and then I'll get to the questions. Running for Congress in the Texas 22nd District. Just south and west of Houston. A seat currently held by Republican Pete Olson. Sri won the primary in a tough late May runoff. He was raised in Houston. He's of mixed origin. Father is an immigrant from India, and his mother Margaret is from the United States. He's a University of Texas grad with a master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School. He spent a career in the State Department, over 14 years, multiple tours of duty across lots of hotspots, and he's multilingual in 5 languages.
Plus English.
6, right? I forgot English, including Spanish and Hindi, and he's also done defense advisory work in Capitol Hill. So this is the cream of the crop, ladies and gentlemen. This is leadership. In any event, let me get to the questions, and I'm hoping that it spurs some real thinking from you. I'd really like a lot of our audience participation in the Q&A. Aruna, first question for you. You moved to the United States as a girl from India. Tell us about your early life, and besides your parents, any mentors from your childhood in America?
Well, Raoul, first of all, thank you for moderating this panel. And for every one of you, thank you for being here and investing in our democracy. It's really encouraging to see all the panelists here also. I think this is a time for Indian Americans' voice to be finally heard, and I am so thrilled to be part of this journey. So to answer your question, as was said earlier, I came to this country when I was 7 years old, didn't know a word of English, and I got a funny story. The first day I went to school, I'll never forget walking into the classroom, feeling scared, not being able to communicate with any of the kids. Nobody looked like me. But I wanted to fit in, right? So at lunchtime when we went, I did whatever all the kids did. I ate what they did. Didn't taste like, the curries at home. It was bland food, but I thought, okay, I'll try it anyway. And then I drank cold milk. Never had cold milk before. So I get back to the classroom. What do you suppose I did? I vomited all over my desk, right? So I am terrified. My mom comes and picks me up. I go home and I'm hysterical and crying, and I tell her, I don't want to go back to school. I hate cold milk. I want to go back to India and be with Grandma again. By the end of the day, one of my classmates came to our door, knocked on it, and in her hand were a stack of paintings that all the children in the classroom had made for me with little smiley faces and hearts on it. And, it was a very profound moment for me that I'll never forget, because you can have all the policies in the world, in this country that you want, but it's the people that implement it and humanize it. And so it was the educator, the teacher in the classroom that understood the isolation, the fear that I was feeling, and taught the kids what I believe to be one of the most important human qualities, which is empathy for others. And that's what I took away from that experience. So, from there onwards, it was the educators that not only taught me English, but allowed me and helped me to assimilate into a new world. And so growing up, it was basically sticking out as a sore thumb everywhere you went, right? I grew up in the Midwest, so I like to say that I spent my entire life basically trying to fit into a space that didn't have me in mind. Whether it was being an immigrant child, growing up in middle America, or being an engineer in a male-dominated field, or a female legislator in a male Caucasian-dominated field, this is a space I've been fighting my entire life. I'm used to this lane, and I say, the biggest thing is get comfortable about being uncomfortable in life. If you can step out of that comfort zone, and embrace the jagged edges, that's where everything lies on the other side. And I'm sure that's the experience many people in this room have experienced in life too.
That's terrific, Aruna. Thank you. Ravi, let me ask you a question about college life. What was college life for you? Did you have an inkling that public service was in your future? And also, did you know that you wanted to stay local?
Yeah, first, I also want to thank Raj Goyal, Deepak Raj, IA Impact for having this event, which is critical to uplifting the Indian American community. So thank you for the panel and the event itself. College life, I don't remember too much about it. That was a while ago. Cal Berkeley was a very active school in the sense that it taught you how to think outside the box. So I did what's called an interdisciplinary studies major. I started out as a political science major, but realized that, you would take the word political and you take the word science, they don't really match because politics is not quite a science. There's no scientific element to things like racism or social injustice. So although I tried to study political science, I realized that there's something more to understanding the human nature beyond simply trying to explain politics and human nature in the form of science. It's something more than that. There is an art to it. So I became a political psychology major, combining sociology, psychology, and political science. And really, Berkeley was a place that taught you how to think outside the box. I had the chance to study at the LSE in London after that. Never really thought when you're in London doing a dissertation on consociational democratic politics in South Africa that you're going to run for a councilman in Hoboken, New Jersey. So that wasn't really on my mind in college. That I was thinking, I was learning about much larger things on the political scale. And then with time, living in Hoboken, I realized that what was impacting me more than anything else was not really what was happening with my congressman, but what my local planning board member was doing, my local councilman was doing, my local mayor was doing. That was having an actual impact on my day-to-day quality of life more than anything else. So that's when I started kind of looking a little bit more local and kind of realizing that in some sense politics is all local.
Thank you. Sri, you've had a very interesting career in foreign service. What led you to that? And do you think your mixed heritage had anything to do with your foreign service career?
First, I want to thank all of the people. Can I just see how many people are running for office in the room? Can we just have a round of applause for everybody who stepped into the arena? It is a very big decision to actually step into the arena and run for office yourself. And then thank you to all of the people in the room who are supporting us who are running for office as well. I want to I want to really appreciate that because it takes both sides to do this. In answer to your question, I actually studied abroad in college. I went to the University of Texas and I studied abroad in Russia. And what I realized during my year abroad was that everywhere I went, I was a representative for America, whether I wanted to be or not. And a lot of people had never met an American before, and especially didn't have me as the stereotype of what an American is. And I realized that I could do a lot of good throughout the world. There's many conflicts in the world. And serving in the Foreign Service, I was able to go and try to reduce some of that conflict and preserve stability, so preserving national security, but also being a good representative for America and dispelling some of those stereotypes. So I've served in conflict zones, in Iraq, I've served in Jerusalem, and in all of these places, I had to break down some of the stereotypes of what an American was. I've been told before, can I see a real American? And I said, I'm here. I actually am the American officer here. And
where are you really from?
Exactly. And the truth is that question, I've had to explain that question. I'm sure many people here have had that same issue. It's not because I'm not proud of my Indian heritage, but the fact is that I get asked that question 1,000 times. Where are you from? Houston. Where are you really from? My opponent in this race, Pete Olson, never gets asked, are you really from Sweden? It doesn't happen. And that kind of difference is what I have to explain to people. That is why that question actually is a microaggression. And it's something that we have to break down, this stereotype of a perpetual foreigner. And hopefully we're doing some of that here.
That's terrific. Ron, when did you start thinking about a career in politics?
You sure you don't want to ask me a spelling bee question?
Oh, no, yeah.
I'd be really bad. Well, thank you for the question. And first, I want to say, as everyone has said, thank you to Impact Fund for bringing us all together and for the support on my campaign. As all of you that are running, you know that there are times in the campaign where it can be lonely. You're out there, it's freezing, and you're knocking on a door, and to know that you have a community like this behind you is special. And to that point, I look at this section of what's this called, the path less traveled. I probably have the least path that's traveled because I knew in 11th grade that I wanted to go into politics and public service. And it was actually because I was involved in a program called Junior Statesman of America, something that I'm trying to get more of Indian American youth to know about and enroll in. But from that moment on, I learned about government, I learned about politics, debate. I ended up actually going to George Washington University, and it was great to be there, be in D.C., do the internships. When I first approached my parents about this, my brother's a doctor, an actual doctor. I know it says healthcare advocate, but close enough on the description. I'll have to show this to my mom, and my brother, who's an actual doctor, will be upset. But he's a doctor, and my sister went to Brown University, and I said, I want to go to George Washington to study political science. And my parents, they're like, what is political science? And I eventually explained, and they're like, okay, you're going to college, that's what we care about, And but honestly, that from that moment on in high school and then college, I went on to go work on campaigns and eventually worked for a congressman and on the advocacy side in the state on the state level. All of that really started when in high school, and I took on different forms. I went from internships to campaigns to on the government side and now to the lobbying side. And I got a taste for each of the different aspects of the political process, the legislative process. But I'll be honest with you, during that course, during that time period, I never thought I would run for office. And when this opportunity came up, I was still hesitant, but everyone around me in my community knew I was so passionate about politics and making a change. They said, if you're not going to do it, then how do you expect other people in our community to do it? And so, with the coalition that we built, we were able to make it happen. But I could not have told you in 11th grade that I was going to be here.
That's terrific. Aruna, back to you. I have a question about surprises running for office. Some of the largest surprises you had in running for office, either at the state level or now that you're running at the federal level.
The whole process is a challenge, and there's surprises everywhere. And I embrace that. There's situations that are difficult to face, but I can tell you, the first time I ran, I didn't think that I would ever be elected because I looked around the country at that time, and particularly in the Maryland General Assembly. I said, look, there is no Indian American, female there that's elected. We do have an Indian American legislator. His name is Kumar Barve, who first ran in 1990 and became their first Indian American in the nation to be elected to a state legislature. But when the activists approached me and wanted me to run, I hesitated. And there's statistic on that. You have to ask a woman 7 times before she decides to run for public office, because women make up all the reasons why they shouldn't be running. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not a good public speaker, I don't have enough degrees. How many times do you think you have to ask a man to run? Zero, right? Men are born thinking that, they're ready to take on the world, and that's exactly how we need to be. Men will make up all the reasons, make a list why they should run, that they are smart, that they're best candidate, and that's how we as females have to approach it. And I'll tell you one of the challenges I faced. So it was myself, my own barriers, my own inhibitions that I had. When I got over that, then it was knocking on doors. So I had a funny incident one time where my husband went and put my yard signs, what he thought was a public right-of-way, and turned out to be private property of a very conservative Republican. So I'm at work, I get a call, and the person's angry, and he says, "Is this Aruna Miller's office?" Well, he doesn't understand that when you're running as a delegate, your office is just you and your husband, right? And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." He goes, "You tell Aruna Miller I want these signs off my yard. I'm a Republican. I would never vote for her." And I said, "Okay, I'll let her know that." And I hang up, right? I call up my husband and I yell at him. I'm like, "What did you do? You put these signs in this guy's yard," and he's all mad at me. And I'm like, okay. So it was a moment where I said, what can I do? Should I take the path less traveled and confront the situation, or should I just ignore it? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I gotta go drive up and down that road every single day to get home, and I'm gonna be having a heart attack every time I go by this guy's house because he's so angry. I could just take the signs on, call it a day, and it's over. But I decided to take the challenge on, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna face this guy. So I drove up into his long driveway, I knock on his door, and I'm like, he's gonna open that door with a gun, right at me. And instead, an elderly couple opened the door, they invite me in, turns out it's his parents, and I talk with them for about a half an hour about many issues, and I said, please tell your son I stopped by, and they said, oh honey, we certainly will. I leave, I get another call from him. He goes, were you just at my house? And I go, yeah, I was. He goes, my parents really liked you. He goes, why don't you come over? I want to hear a little bit more about you. So I went over, and sure enough, 80% of the things we agreed on. It was 20% of the things that we didn't agree on, but when I explained where my positions were, he got it. He understood it. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face in life. Whether you're in disagreement with someone or you're trying to work with the political party on the other side, it's understanding what they're saying, it's listening to them, and it's not, coming in with your own ideas and saying that you're not willing to move the needle in their direction a little bit. So it was such a gratifying experience for me. It was a challenge, but I took on that challenge, and since this day, this gentleman has donated to my campaign every single year.
There's no such thing as a non-turnable vote.
There you go, and he put up a sign that said, Republicans for Aruna Miller. So there you go. So don't ever let a challenge stop you from anything that you pursue in life. Take it on, head on.
Aruna, that is so inspiring. Thank you. Ravi, question for you, which is, what do you think has changed in American life, if anything, that makes it possible for so many more South Asians to be running than even 5 years ago?
I first became involved in politics through then Councilman Cory Booker, who I happened to serendipitously meet when he was running for office in 2002 for mayor. Wasn't successful in 2002. He eventually became mayor in 2006. And in 2008, he asked me to support Senator Barack Obama's campaign for president. And that was, and being part of Team Booker all those years, knocking on doors and trying to raise money for his campaigns, there's a certain loyalty, and I didn't think that Senator Obama had much of a chance of winning, but I thought it was the right thing to do. I liked him. After the Iowa caucuses, when he won the Iowa caucus, I shut down my law firm. I drove with my brother up to New Hampshire for 1 week. We knocked on doors in the middle of the winter in New Hampshire for a full week, and that was my first experience kind of canvassing for a candidate. He didn't win that primary, but he went on to win the nomination, as you know. And my wife and I and my 2-year-old daughter went to Pennsylvania, to Bethlehem, to knock on doors in Pennsylvania for the general. And after he won in 2008, I thought that if America's ready for a black president, they're definitely ready for an Indian councilman in Hoboken.
Amen.
So that was an inspiration and why I think politics is changing. But when I decided to run, people said to me, the so-called political geniuses, they said, "How many Sikhs live in Hoboken?" I said, "Well, there's my brother and I and my wife." And well, how many Indians live in Hoboken? I was like, "Well, there's some." And how many Asians live in Hoboken? As with well, it's I'm stumbling at this point. They said, "Well, you're not Irish, you're not Italian, you're not Latino. Where are you going to draw your vote? Why are you going to vote?" One person said to me, "You have a turban and a beard, and that will not go unnoticed." And it was not a compliment. So I didn't know whether or not being an Indian American would be a liability or to being successful in the political arena. I wouldn't know whether or not this community is ready for a more diverse candidate. This community that's largely Caucasian, about 85% Caucasian, 12% Latino, about 3% African American. So I did what any good Indian boy would do. I worked my tail off. My wife and I were up at 5 in the morning every morning. My wife works twice as hard as I do. She'd slap on a campaign T-shirt, get me up, knock on doors, 7 days a week, nonstop till the campaign ends. And that's at the end of the day how you win elections. No one's going to give it to you. Power is not given, it's earned. So when I ran for mayor, none of the big boys, Phil Murphy or any of the senators or the big politicians came into Hoboken to say, "We're going to give you our endorsement." I had to roll up my sleeve and earn it, and that's the way politics is. So and I'm sure a lot of minority candidates can say to get to that level, sometimes power is it's not given, it's earned or taken. So.
Thank you. I have 2 more questions for the panelists, and I'm definitely going to let it open up to all of you. This is a question for Sri on the point about community. When we were talking before, we talked a little bit about engaging the Indian community and whether the South Asian community has been supportive of your run, and also how you have galvanized them or not galvanized them to support you specifically in your race. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So first of all, I have to say that when we started this race, I was told by consultants, do not bother with the Asian vote because Asians don't vote, and the surest way to lose an election is to try and go after people who don't vote. We completely violated that advice, went against it, and we went the opposite direction. We said maybe that the reason that they don't vote is because we don't bother. We're not actually out there engaging with them. And it turns out that in Texas at least, 71% of Asians have never been contacted by any political campaign. One of those reasons, and a big reason that people told me was not a big reason before, but it turned out to be, is language. So about 39% of the Asian community does not speak English as their first language or speak English well. And so what we did is we started by taking about 50,000 voters on our own, and we tagged them by Gujarati and Kannada and Telugu and Malayali. We had Malayali Christian, Malayali Hindu, and Sunni Muslim, and Ismaili Muslim, and Bori Muslim, and Sikh, and Parsi, and Jain. And then we found people within each one of those communities. So we reached out to the Telugu Cultural Association, to the Gujarati Samaj, to every single community that we could. We showed up at mandars and gurudwaras and at jamaat khanas and at masjids, and we did serious engagement. We had serious outreach to all these communities because, when you get a random call, somebody knocking on your door or, calling you, and they have no connection to your community whatsoever, chances are you're probably not going to give them the time of day. But it's very different when somebody calls you, opens up the conversation in Gujarati or, goes to your temple, or maybe is your uncle or auntie calling and actually asking, which actually happened in our campaign a lot. We put out the list and said, can you contact the 40 members of your family and make sure they come out to vote, which is something that I hadn't seen other campaigns doing. And we had people phone banking in 12 different languages. I don't know if any other congressional campaign is doing that in the country, because we speak 104 languages in my district, if you believe it. And so the results, people said, even if you double this output, it's not going to change the election, because we looked at the results from the last midterm election where less than 6% of the electorate was Asian. Well, in the first round of our primary, we got the Asian electorate up to 17%, and in the second round in the runoff, which we just won a few weeks ago, we got up to 28% of the electorate was Asian.
Don't forget your own people.
Yeah.
And the final question from me, until I open it up, is I'll give it to Ram, which is kind of ending us where we started with the name of the panel, which is the road or the path less traveled. So my question for you is, in fact, politics the path less traveled for South Asians, or has it become a mainstream option for us? Ram?
It's a really good question. I would say kind of. I don't think it has been the mainstream path, obviously, but we start to see that changing, and it's evident in this room. People are stepping up, whether it's for their school board because they care about the textbooks that their kids are using and learning from, or because they want to make a difference at the federal level, the board level, et cetera. I think that it is absolutely changing, and I think a lot of it has to do with the people that have been elected. I was knocking on doors in my district, and I knocked on over 9,000 doors, and one of the things I came across was I would knock on a door, give them my literature. They'd be like, "Oh no, I know you. You just call me Ram." And I would think about it, and then a couple times I started to think about it, and I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about, but okay, I'll go with it." And then, sure enough, I started to remember in 2016, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy ran a television ad that said, "Just call me Raja." And so I was like, oh, okay, that's what they're referring to. And then obviously I had the dilemma of like, okay, do I correct people from now on, or do I just let it be? Are people going to be confused that a congressman is running for state senate in a different area? But I think it's a testament to the fact that we've broken these barriers. And it's we have members of Congress, we have elected officials at different levels across the country, and people see that, then they get to meet you. And they get, there was so much said about my primary. You can't beat a 20-year incumbent. Your name is Ramachandra Rao Villivalam. You're a dark man trying to knock on doors to meet older white ladies at 8 p.m. at night. They're not going to open their door. Like, there's so many things, there's so many reasons I was given that would be challenging. But the reality is, they opened their door. We had a conversation about education or home care, health care, whatever the case may be, and they got to know me. And over the course of 4 months, I was able to earn their vote. And I think that's important because we shouldn't be deterred by our name or the color of our skin or whatever's come before us, but we need to give ourselves the opportunity to go out and win votes and give people credit that people have open minds. So I think we can get there.
I personally have about 65 questions each for these guys, but it's now up to you. We have 5 or 6 minutes to ask questions from the field. We have some roving mics going around, so can I see some hands? Oh, I see a lot of hands. Over there on this table, lady in the white dress. Do you introduce yourself and then ask your question, please?
Hi, now you can hear me. Hi, my name is Aya. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm really interested in, given this is about the path less traveled, And a lot of you have been talking about how you've done outreach, and a lot of the conversation right now has been about physical, one-on-one, door knocking and connecting, which I know is super important. But how did you actually balance that with the fact that you're only one human and you can only be in one place at the same time? And even though there are other brown people who they may mistake you for, you still are only one person. How did you balance and decide on a strategy that involved mail, digital, TV? How do you do that when you're new to politics, when you are an unknown entity and most likely not flush with funds?
So I can try to start, but to briefly answer that question, it's a very good question. In Hoboken, it's not New York City, so you can win an election, or you can swing a few percentage points by having a great field operation. So field is primary in Hoboken, and you use volunteers, not just myself, but people who will volunteer. And then you also have your best volunteers who you offer financial incentives to do actual more, to be paid canvassers. That's one way. But what I noticed in my election was that when we're looking at the polling, I was polling near the top. Game 7 of the American League Division Series, the person who was polling last ran television ads. The Yankees were playing the Dodgers. I suppose I remember watching that game with my wife at a bar, and he started running television ads, and all of a sudden, he was a front runner. So, and he had a very good marketing campaign. It was like a dead heat. So we had to make a game time decision to spend, I think it was about $30,000, which in a small election is nothing to sniff at. But we had to go on TV. Just to combat that. So it's got to be, and we also hired, I'm forgetting their name now, one of the best mail campaign firms in the country. But I think we ran a great mail campaign ad. Wasn't cheap, but it was a combination of canvassing, having a good mail ad campaign, and also we had to make a last minute decision to go on TV at the end.
And I would just add, the advice that you get, it was said earlier, it's overwhelming. You have everyone coming at you with their 2 cents, and they think that, they're the best thing to slice bread. But what I will say is that the most important aspect that you can invest in is building a good team. Because ultimately you need to make sure, there's 1,000 mail firms, 1,000 people that do TV, et cetera. And quite honestly, I think this is what this is about, right? I mean, being able to call Gautam at Indian Impact Fund and say, hey, I need your help in building my team, I want to run for this. I think this is a great way to address that.
Can I say, every market is different. The market in New Jersey is completely different than the market in Houston. We in our primary did not do anything on TV. We did, radio some. But there was a woman in a Republican primary in Houston who spent, I think, $6 million of her own money, and she was on TV all the time, sending out mailers every single day leading up to the primary, and she got 3rd place in her primary. So I would say, is anybody from the D-Trip here? Okay. Paid communication, yes, it's important. It's important to get your name out there, but I truly believe that a strong field program is actually what's going to win a lot of these races on the ground. We had a tremendous field program. We had basically community organizing in all these different areas, and a lot of them now within the towns within my district, they kind of get together and they pull people together for house parties and meetings, and they actually go out and they run field on their own, and they come back to us with the data. And so we're doing the work in this entire county. Fort Bend County is the biggest part of my district, and we are actually doing the work of organizing the entire county and helping to run that field game for them. And I think strong field game, that's something that Texas in particular lacks. That is how you flip these districts.
And I'd just like to add to, running a successful campaign is a million little things. Top of that million little things is name recognition. Getting your name out as often and as possible. So that includes getting yard signs up in people's yards, not the public right of way, and make sure it's okay with them before you do it. Bumper stickers on, and most importantly, that I found, at least in my race, has been third-party affiliate endorsements, right? Whether it's the teachers that are endorsing you, whether it's the Sierra Club, whether it's the local paper or the national paper or other candidates that have been elected already, because they have their own communities that they can reach out into. And that's how you build upon it. To get this third-party affiliation groups to endorse you, then they get the word out, and so on and so on. But the most effective way, again, is name recognition, and you do this by knocking on doors, getting your signs up, meet and greets, doing mailers, going on television if you can afford that, and being on radio. It's all a multiple, facet of things that make it happen.
We're getting the hook, so I want to say thank you so much to our panelists who are huge inspiration. Sorry we didn't have time to take more questions, but we were running behind. So, guys, thank you very much indeed.